Well, hello and welcome to the video. I hope you guys are well. Today's video is basically just me and a tree in a field, and that's what this video is all about. A little bit about just being relaxed and chilling out, a little bit about going back to photography, and a little bit about just being at one and at peace and not worrying so much about the grand vistas and the fantastic locations, and worrying more, if you like, about the photograph and the art of taking it, and maybe even a little bit of processing, who knows. So I want to say a big thank you before we get going to a guy called Grant Bush. He probably doesn't watch the channel, but he's my inspiration for this tree. I looked for local trees, local lone trees on Flickr, and Grant Bush has taken quite a few shots of different trees, this being one of them. So I want to say thank you very much. Took a little bit of hunting down to find it because he doesn't make it easy to get the actual location of the tree, but I found it. So yeah, and it's a nice little tree actually, and there's some really interesting lines that the tractors have left leading off into the distance. The sky is quite interesting. It's about 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. It's not golden hour, nothing crazy like that. I just thought I'd just come out and enjoy taking a few shots in the middle of the day, maybe try and sort of hone my photographic skills and see what we can get. The sky is getting more interesting by the minute because we've got some nice dark clouds coming over, which might give us a splash of rain, you never know. But yeah, it's just a nice little local scene, and it's something that I want to build up. I want to build up a portfolio of local lone trees. It's a project that I talked about way back last summer now, I think. That I just haven't got around to doing, but I know there's a few in the area. So yeah, I'm going to build up a little bit of a portfolio of that, and this is number one here. So I'll get cracking, shall I? And maybe talk to you about my thoughts on the composition. Okay, so for me, there are three really obvious elements to this composition, and they're the three that I think you've just got to get right. Number one, the obvious one, is the tree. That's the focal point of the shot. Number two is this leading line of the tractor marks, where obviously the tractor has gone through the fields. It's left it cropless, so it gives you a nice line that sort of runs up towards the tree and then off and round the side. So that's actually quite an interesting look. And number three is the sky. Obviously the background is the sky. There are no mountains, there's nothing like that, so the sky needs to be relatively interesting, which I have to say right now, it is fantastically interesting, or it's getting very interesting anyway. The only issue here with this shot that could be, or that probably will be an issue, is the horizon line, because it's a hill, which is great because it's cutting off everything behind it, which really allows you to focus down on the tree and on the major elements of the shot, the three that I've just mentioned. But the problem is because it's a hill, there's a curvature to it, and it's going to look like the horizon's off, obviously, because it's going to be going up from left to right in the shot. Now, whether I counteract that a little bit by sort of in post just maybe slightly leveling off that horizon to make it a bit less jarring, I'm not quite sure, or maybe I'll just leave it as it is. I don't know. But the problem is the more that I counteract the leveling off, if you like, or the more that I counteract the curvature by leveling it off, the more the tree is going to start to slant, and then that's going to look wrong. So there may be a balancing act to have, or to be had, or there may just be the fact that I just leave it and we accept the fact that the horizon is going to look off. So the first shot I've got here, I'm shooting it in portrait mode. I've got the leading lines coming in from the left hand side, and they're just staying off on the left hand side. The tree is actually also on the left hand side, so weirdly all the main elements of the shot at the moment are over to the left, and then you've got the curvature going up towards the right, and then the rest of it's focused on the sky, which is maybe a little bit unbalanced at the moment, so I might need to just reflect on that. What I may do is I may come further across and then have the tree more central and the leading line leading into a tree and then snaking off to the left a bit more prominently. It's just starting to rain, but only a spit. But I am getting some really interesting skies as a result of that, so that's all good. So I've moved back to where I was. I did have a little look around to see if there was anything more beneficial in different directions, but unfortunately there isn't. Oh my God, the rain's coming in. I was just about to say the sun's out, which it actually is, but the rain's actually hitting now as well. But with the sun being out, it's given a really nice sort of like a sheen to all of the individual leaves of this crop. And I've turned the polarizer around, so essentially it's off, and it's allowing that to reflect in the image. So I'm getting, not only am I getting some really nice light, I'm getting a nice sheen on this, and also because the clouds are quite dark in the background and the sun is illuminating the tree, I'm getting a really nice separation between all of the branches and little individual twigs of the tree and the dark background. And combined with the sheen off these leaves, I think it looks really nice. But it is raining, so I wonder, sun's a bit high. It's a shame really. If the sun was sort of a bit further over, we might actually get a bit of a rainbow, but I don't think that's going to happen here. So I think it's fair to say that I've worked the area now thoroughly. I mean, I haven't moved laterally across, I've moved up and down towards the tree and back. I think that these leading lines are essential for this shot. So moving over and just taking it across this big field is just going to give an awful lot of dead space. So I think that, yeah, I did consider it, but definitely it's these leading lines, the tree and the sky, that are going to make this shot. So there's no point me moving elsewhere. But in terms of just these three elements, I think I've worked this really well, and I've really concentrated on hard on the photography today, much more than I have on the video. And that's, I think, what I need to really get my head back into this whole thing, and to get a bit more practice, and to just to remember that I'm here for the photography, you know, not just for the lovely drone shots and the putting together the video. So I think what we'll do now is we'll take all these shots home, have a look on Lightroom and maybe in Photoshop as well, and see if we can process a couple of nice images. Okay, so I'm back home now, so let's have a look at one of these images, shall we, and see what we can do with it. Okay, so I think this is the image that I'm going to do something with and share with you my processing technique on it. And the reason that I picked this one out is because I think it'd be quite interesting to see if we could do something with this area over here that's sort of dead space almost, just to make that a little bit more interesting, just to make it a bit more of a pleasing image. So if you've taken one similar to this yourself and you've got a large area where there's not a lot going on, and you think to yourself, well, what can I do about that? How can I make it a bit more interesting? Well, you know, let's have a look and see if we can do something with that here. So the first thing I'm going to do with this image is I'm going to crop it down and I'm going to straighten it off. And if you remember, we were talking about this straightening in actually while I was out there, and I was saying I didn't want the tree to look too much on the lean if you straighten it off. But actually, if you give it a bit of a straighten off there, it doesn't look too bad at all. The tree doesn't look too bad at all. Now I've cropped it down a little bit from the sky, and I'm going to crop up a little bit from the bottom here. Nothing too major. I just want to do that, and I may crop in this way a bit, but for now I'm just going to leave that as it is, I think. And the tree's sort of on the third, and the horizon's sort of on the third, and I'm happy with that. So that's what we're going to do with that. And now I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to push up the exposure a little bit, because it feels to me like a slightly underexposed image. So I'm just going to have that as a starting point. I'm going to cool the temperature down a bit as well, because I don't remember it being quite that yellow while I was out there. It's something a bit more like that, I think. Okay, and I'm going to drop the highlights down a little bit. And I know people say, oh, you know, blah, 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 dropping the highlights, push the shadows. It's just my preferred method. I just like to do it. I don't do it on every single one, but on this one I'm going to do it. So I'm going to pull the shadows up a little bit. I'm going to just hit the Alt key on my PC. I think it's Control on the Mac, and just slide the whites up until I can see the white point. There it is. I'm just going to, in the top corner there, you can see it. I'm just going to pull that back a touch. I'm just going to slide the blacks down until you can see that black point in there. And that's quite a way down. I don't want to go too far. I don't want to ridiculously contrast the image, but somewhere around about there I think works okay. And then I'm just going to give it a little bit of texture and just a little bit of extra vibrance and a little bit less saturation. Just pull that saturation back a tiny bit. So something around about there, I think. Now looking at it, this area here I think is going to be something of an issue, because it's a very bright spot in the sky, and I think you're going to look here and then all of a sudden, oh, and you're over there. So you're looking at the leading line, and that bright spot is going to keep dragging you away. So either I'm going to do something with that in Photoshop, or I might just simply crop in some more from the right hand side just to eliminate a bit of that. But anyway, I think what we'll do first off here is we'll just give a little bit more punch to the sky, just a tiny bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this this grad tool here, and what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to just show you something really quickly. So I'm going to select it here, and if I just press the mouse and drag it down, if I move off that vertical axis ever so slightly, you can see that my grad is not going in a particularly straight line. So if you've got something like this where you've got a flat horizon, or you've got something where you maybe got you've got the sea, obviously a flat horizon, you may come into or struggle, have a few issues with it. So let's delete that. If you hold down the shift key on the PC, be honest with you, I'm not sure what the key is on the Mac. I'm assuming it may well be the shift key as well, and then drag it down, you'll find that you can just drag it down in a straight line, and even if you just move off that vertical axis, you're still getting a nice straight grad. So I'm just going to pull that down, and the one thing to remember is let go of your mouse before you let go of the shift, because the number of times I've let go of the shift and then just moved it ever so slightly and we're back to square one. So I'm just going to just pull that up a bit so it's not affecting it quite so much down in this area, and I'm getting a full effect up here. And I'm just going to, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to perhaps push up the contrast a little bit, drop the highlights a little bit, drop the whites a tiny bit, maybe just drop the exposure just a fraction. I don't want to go too far with it, but that gives it a little bit more, just a little bit more sort of darkness, a little bit more punch. Now if you want to go mad here, you want to really give it some, the dehaze tool is brilliant for this sort of thing, but if you've really got to use it in moderation. You start pushing it, I mean, you can, oh yeah, I mean, you can really go to town and go way too far on it. So I'm actually not going to use that, because I only want just a little hint, or just a subtle change. I don't want it to be like too obvious. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the range mask, and I'm going to turn on the luminance range mask, and I'll just show you what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to pull this up, which should knock out some of the tree branches from the mask. So if you look there, it's covering the tree, and if you just pull it back up, it just pulls it away from those branches, so you're not getting like ridiculously black or ridiculously affected branches. And I think that's probably okay there. I might just give it a tiny little bit less exposure just to bring it back to where it was before I applied the range mask. Something like that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up another grad, but from the bottom instead this time. I'm just going to get rid of those effects. And this time I think I'm just going to add a little bit more texture and a little tiny bit of clarity, just to sort of really bring out the sharpness in these very foreground areas here. And I might just give it a little bit more contrast and a tiny little bit less exposure. I don't want to go mad on that. Maybe just pull up the highlights a touch, the whites a touch. Yeah, so I quite like that. And if you look, actually, you can see when we were out taking this photo and taking some of the photos, I was talking about the polarizer and how by not polarizing the image, you're getting some quite nice bright spots on these leaves here. Whereas if I'd have polarized it, you'd have lost that. And I kind of think that adds a bit of interest to the shot. It just gives it sort of almost brings out the leaves more than if you'd have polarized it and just lost them and just had a green mass with no highlights. So quite happy with that there at the moment. Now, what else do I need to do to this? I'm just thinking what else I would quite like to do in terms of any sort of work. I'm thinking that needs to go at some point. I think over here it's fine. I don't think I'm going to mess about with that too much. I might do, I might not, I'm not sure. But now let's start adding a bit of interest, I think, over here. Find something to make this a bit more interesting. And what I'm going to use here are radial filters. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and emulate some sunshine in post. I'm going to try and fake it a bit. So I'm going to try and make out there's some dappled light over here. So I'm going to take a radial filter here first off, and I'm just going to pull it here around a little bit and pull it over, maybe down a touch. And I'm going to give that a little bit. I'm going to warm it up. Now, the other thing I have to do, of course, is invert it, because I don't want it affecting everywhere else. I want it affecting this area here. I'm going to warm it up a bit. Oh, I've got texture up there. And I'm going to push up the exposure on it. Let's make that a bit bigger. Just pull it over a little bit. So there you can see it's sort of faking a bit of light on the land there. And if I duplicate that, so I've done that by right clicking, and then we'll just pull this down, flatten it out a little bit here, just pull it down a bit more. I'm going to pull this one down a little bit. Just going to tone this one down a touch. It isn't quite as bright. Maybe something like that. Okay. And I think what we'll do as well is we'll just put a bit of a range mask on this again with the luminance, so it's just not quite affecting the darks. Let's just do the same with that one as well. So it's only affecting the brighter. Actually, I think I'll leave that one alone, saying that. Okay, and then let's just duplicate this again. I think what we'll do is we'll put one over here. pull it down a touch. And I think with this one I'm just going to push the exposure up a bit more. Push this up a little bit more as well. Just turn that luminance mask. Let's turn that luminance mask off completely. Okay. Just wonder if I want to turn this up, the exposure up on this even higher. I don't want to go mad, but so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give it an effect that there's some sort of dappled light basically on the scene. So let's have a look at that before and after. So if I turn these off, I think, where were we? Radial filters. Radial filters, I think. So there, before we added the radial filter. So that's what it looked like before. And then that's what it looks like once you've added them. And I just think that that just gives a bit more interest to these areas here. And I think what we'll do actually is we'll just add another one here, a really thin one. Just drop it in here and actually darken this down a little bit. Of course, need to invert it again. I don't know why they do that. I think it's why Photoshop or why Adobe have decided that they think that everyone wants to do everything outside of the filter. Surely they'd want to do it inside of the filter and have the invert to be affecting everything on the outside. I don't know, it didn't quite make any sense to me. So maybe I'll just drop the shadow there a little bit just to darken that down. Just elongate that out a touch more. So that might give you a real feeling that there's a sort of a contour in the land there. Yeah, quite like that. I think that's quite good. Let's just duplicate that out and maybe just put one of these at the top here, just to give a bit more of a feel of light and dark. Just turn down on that a bit. Okay, I think this one, don't want to make it too obvious. Okay, so I think that's quite nice there. That's just giving a little bit more of a lift to the land. And I just want to put one more filter in here, radial filter, on the tree itself. What I want to do is I just want to brighten up that tree. So I'm just going to push the exposure up a fraction on this again. Need to invert it. Where are you? Okay, so just push the exposure up on the tree a little bit. And I also want to push the shadows up a touch. And again, I'm going to use the range mask here. Only this time, instead of it not affecting the dark parts, I want it not to affect the light parts. I'm going to pull it from the other direction. So if you see the luminance mask here, you can see it's affecting everything, and now it's just affecting the parts of the tree, which is exactly what I want. So I've just lifted that tree out a little bit, and I think I might put a little bit of texture on that. Maybe just, I think the blacks are fine. Maybe I'll just pull the contrast up a bit. So it isn't ridiculously obvious, but if you look, you can see from the before and after. So I think this was previous to it, so let's just let's take that off. So that was it before, and that's it after. And it's just, I feel it's just pulled the tree out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to add in a little vignette. I don't go too mad on it, just a little bit there. Right, now I think I'm going to head into Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and let's have a look. I just want to get rid of that. So literally all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use the content aware fill because it should do a pretty good job, I would have thought. Shift and F5, content aware, not really. Alright, Control and Z to bring that back. Control and D to get rid of the selection area. I'm just going to hit on my clone stamp tool. I'm going to hit the small square bracket or the left square bracket to just reduce the size. I'm going to select an area here to clone with, and I'm just going to clone that bit, and there you go. Let's have a look at this area here then, this larger area, and see if we can just tone it down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this brush size very large, and I'm going to change my mode on my clone to darken. I'm going to turn the opacity down to about 60 and turn the flow down to about 60 as well. And then I'm going to select from an area here, and I'm just going to paint that in and just darken that off a little bit. So what it's done is it's kept the main area of interest. So if I go back, it's kept the main area of detail, and you can still see that, but actually it's just darkened it off so it isn't quite as jarring, and you're not going to just find yourself staring at it all the time and being drawn over to it. So okay, so that's those changes now taking effect in Lightroom. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a couple of final things here. I'm just going to tone down the colour. I think it's slightly too much there. I think that's better. So if you look at it before, so that's it before, and that's it. Just pull those colours back a bit. I just think there was slightly too much. And I think I'm happy with that. So I very much hope that you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed that little processing package. I hope you maybe got something out of it. I hope that you can see that from taking quite a, reasonably composed but quite a bland image really in terms of the lighting. I hope you can see that with a few subtle tweaks, and I think they were pretty subtle. There wasn't anything that was too heavy-handed there. A few subtle tweaks, you can just pull out a little bit more interest, give the shot a little bit more dynamism, and maybe make it into a slightly better shot than it was originally. I also enjoy that you've hoped. Also hope that you've enjoyed the video on a whole. It was a lot more getting back to basics this week. A lot more about photography. There wasn't any particularly astounding videography in it, and I was way more focusing on trying to get the shots. I still feel like I'm not getting the images at the moment. I still feel like I'm making some quite simple mistakes, and I still feel like I'm not quite there. But I think it's important at these points that you just go out and you keep practicing, and you keep trying, and you keep getting through this sort of mental blockage, and then hopefully we'll get through to the other side. So yeah, there was one other thing actually that I just wanted to say before I go. I want to recommend to you a channel. I'm going to post a link up here. Going to post a link up here, and I'm also going to put it in my description. The guy's name and the name of the channel is Martin Fuge, and I just think I don't know him, we've never met, spoken to him a couple of times through comments, but I just think he seems to be a really good guy. He's put out an awful lot of videos. He's been putting them out for a long time. There's no fanfare with them. There's no sort of, he's not pushing himself too hard, I don't think, and what have you. But he's on 500 subscribers, just over 500 subscribers, and I just feel like give him a go. Go and have a look and see what you think. If you like it, then maybe drop him a like and a comment and subscribe and show him a bit of support. And if you don't, then, you don't have to. No one's forcing you to. But I just think, he's been going an awful long time, and he seems like a good guy. And, maybe we could give him a chance to, push his sub count up a bit and get a few more people watching his videos. Anyway, that's it. that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Like I said, hope you enjoyed this week's video. Should be out and about next week, hopefully. And if I am, I will see you then.